You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi everybody, it's good to be back with you again. This is Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis, and I'm your host, Steve Adams, or Mighty Blue, and this is episode 351 of the podcast. Our guest today is a very accomplished young man who is another of the 2022 completers. His name is Samuel Crisp, or Shaker, and I'm sure you're going to be both impressed by him and you'll learn a lot from him in our conversation. He's a physical therapist and he offers some really good advice on how to take care of yourself on long-distance hikes. And he's quite the philosopher as he shares what he learned out there this year. It really is the most simple message, particularly for younger people out on the trail. I made more notes from my conversation with Sam than pretty much anybody I've ever interviewed before. Sam will be on in a moment. After Sam, we got another guy in our Mighty Blue class of 2023. This time it's Mark Carpenter, a retired firefighter. Mark and I had quite a laugh in our conversation. Seems like an easygoing bloke, and I'm sure he'll get on well with everybody out there. Then George Stefanos puts in a big day in the Shennies, the day after Independence Day, finding yet another set of Boy Scouts in a shelter. He is not happy about it. Now, I know I've been promising to open my Hiking Radio Network store to sell you all sorts of t-shirts, mugs and hoodies and so on. As I write this on Wednesday afternoon, I'm hoping to be able to have the store open as you listen tomorrow, Thursday. If I can't, I can't. But I'll be giving it a go. You can find it at hrntradingpost.com, and I'll be incorporating it into the Hiking Radio Network website in the next few days. As I say, I can't promise it'll be up when you hear this, but it just might. So let's start with Samuel Crisp, another young man whose life this year has changed forever by his Appalachian Trail thru-hike. Here's Sam. Now, today's guest, I'm pretty sure about this, is our first ever guest from Bluffton, Ohio. This is Samuel Crisp, or Shaker. Hey, Sam, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hi, Mighty Blue. That's good to be here, man. I'm definitely, I would say I'm the only person from Bluffton, but I know one other person from Bluffton who's done the AT. Probably wasn't on this podcast, though.
Wow, that's something. So why? And I know I've noticed a couple of on one or two of the posts of yours that I've looked at. You mentioned Bluffton a few times. So what's it all about?
Yeah, so it's a tiny little village in northwest Ohio. I think the population is about 4,000 or 5,000 people. No one knows about the AT. So the fact that I went out and did it, and then the person I knew that did it was my track coach from high school. So we're the only two people in Bluffton that have done it, and that's kind of who actually inspired me to do it in the first place. So that's how I found out about it originally.
Well, tell us about that bit then, because we didn't actually talk about that much the other day. We talked about other things when we were originally talking about it. So tell us how you were inspired to get involved.
Yeah, so I'll backtrack a little bit. So I just graduated PT school, physical therapy school from Ohio State, May 8th. So I've been in school pretty much from the time I was 5 to the time I was 24.
Right.
So as I was finishing up school in 2020, going through COVID and everything, I kind of realized I haven't really spent any extended period of time doing something that I wanted to do just for myself. You know, you're kind of working toward that job and always busy with schoolwork or relationships and other things. So I knew when I graduated that I wanted to do something that was just for me. And I was on clinical in Florida by myself. I was single at the time. Like, man, I'll have 6 months of loan deferment and 6 months of time to myself that I can go do whatever I want.
Sure.
And just this random image popped in my head of his name's John Quigeni. He's from Bluffton. And I remember there's this picture of him on top of a mountain, like holding his trekking poles or whatever it may be. And I'm like, man, what was he doing? Like, I just kind of popped in my head. So I went and scrolled way back through Facebook to 2019 and found the post. I was like, that Mount Katahdin, the Appalachian Trail, like, I wonder what that's about. And that was a year before I got onto the trail. And it just kind of took off from there. As soon as I saw it, I was like, I want to do this. I'm going to do it, and never really looked back.
So some people dream about this forever, and some people just get it just like that. You're a young guy. What was it about the trail itself that appealed to you? And what did you learn about the trail that made you think, yeah, this is what I want to do?
I don't know. I think I've always kind of liked to do things that are like very much out of my comfort zone, or like things that people wouldn't really expect me to do, I guess. And like I had no hiking experience or anything, and I saw the trail, and it just looked like 5 to 6 months of new experience every single day, and I knew it would be a challenge for me mentally and physically. And I don't know, I just wanted to pursue something I felt like at the end of that would, I don't know, kind of make me proud of myself, I guess. So it looked very appealing in that sense.
That's interesting because this is one of the themes that went through our initial conversation when we talked about it the other day. You know, you have this thing about wanting to test yourself all the time. Most people your age couldn't give a crap about testing themselves. So, so where does that come from? Does that come from anybody, from family or something like that?
That's a good question. You know, I don't know if I have a particular answer for why I'm kind of seeking to test myself or try new things. I just feel like a lot of times when I go out of my comfort zone is when I have those deeper, more fulfilling experiences. Like when you really push yourself past like pain and adversity, like you come out feeling better on the other end. So I don't know if that's just kind of like a source of happiness for me or what, but it's just kind of something I gravitate toward.
And I wonder if that's part of the thing, because you mentioned he was your track coach. So you've done track. Have you done long? Did you do long distance running as well?
No, I did no. I just did sprinting. So.
We are going to talk about that in a minute, though, because I know you've done something
recently.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and you actually finished with the AT about 6 or 7 weeks ago, as we recorded this. I think you finished on September 9th, which when people think about it. You said you graduated physical therapy school on May the 8th. So you didn't get on trail. When did you actually get on trail?
The day I graduated is when I got in the car and left. Me and two of my friends. My friend Ali drove it, me and my friend Nick down, and Nick did the first week with me. So I started the morning of May 9th. So exactly 4 months from the day I summited.
And I did notice something on one of the posts I saw, because I have to do this cyber stalking with people and so on.
Professional stalker.
Exactly, yeah. It's such a terrific thing for a guy in his 60s, late 60s. So, you know, you said that you were thinking, because there was a picture of you at Amicalola Falls, you said you'd expect to be finished in about 5.5 months. So you obviously didn't expect it to be done so quickly. What on earth happened?
No, not at all. So I had like a whole PDF and like spreadsheets laid out, because I tried to do a lot of research since I jumped into it pretty quickly without a whole lot of background. And I had like this PDF laid out of where I'd be each week, so I could have people come visit me, and like I guessed I was going to average, like based on my research, like 15 or 16 miles a day, like eventually. And I just had no experience as a hiker, so I wasn't sure how much I was going to be able to do. So I was trying to be more conservative. Right. And I started out very fast. Like I started out trying to do like 15 to 20 miles a day, because I didn't know if I was going to be able to finish by October 15th when Katahdin closed. And it just ended up I was in a lot of pain the first 2 weeks.
Oh, really? What a surprise.
Yeah. I probably overdid it a little bit, but I had people with me that were encouraging me, so that really helped. And I just kind of came out of the gates hot and never really slowed down. So I just got lucky. I didn't have any setbacks with sickness like Giardia or Noro. Every injury I had, since I have a physical therapy background, I kind of could treat myself on trail. So the first 2 weeks I had like IT band syndrome, Achilles tendonitis, but I used my trekking pole and a glide stick for like lubricant, and would kind of work it out and do a little self-treatment. So I think that really helped.
So in retrospect, although, you know, I've thought about this several times, why would you change anything you did? Because you did it, you finished. So that was great. But in retrospect, if you were doing it more sensibly, do you think you would have started slowly?
I think if I was able to start earlier, I may have started more slowly, because there's always a trade-off, right? When you finish in a smaller amount of time or a shorter amount of time, you can kind of lose some of the amount of time you can spend in town and some of the relationships I could have made earlier on in trail.
Sure.
So since I kept such a fast pace and I started so late, I kind of just met people in passing a day or two at a time, and didn't really create a trail for family. So if I had to do it again, I might start a little earlier and slow down a little bit, but in the same sense, it allowed me a lot of freedom to do other things. Like since there wasn't any huge crowds at all the shelters, there wasn't 60 or 70 people at the shelters. Like I sent my tent home at week 2 and didn't pick it back up until the whites because
really?
the shelters were never full. So I shelter hopped, I think 80% of the trail or more, 85% of the trail. I only used my tent 4 times.
Tell us what a shelter. I mean, I know quite a few listeners have been on the trail, but a hell of a lot haven't. So tell us about the charms of the shelters and what you think of them.
Oh yeah, I mean, at first they're a little like I don't know, they're a little sketchy at first because like you know
crummy,
you got
a bit crummy.
You got mice and wooden floors, and they're a little bit sketchy. But once you make friends with the shelter mice and figure out that you have to sleep with your head facing toward the opening, which I didn't do at first because it's like I want my head to be like away from the bears and all the creatures of the night. But as I went on, the mice were running behind my head, so I just switched because I don't really care if they run by my feet because they always run along the sides and the back of the wall.
That's right. Yeah.
So once you kind of get over that, it's not too bad. A lot of people don't like the bugs and stuff, but I had like a Sea to Summit liner, so I could like cinch that up to my neck, and I never had issues with like mosquitoes or bugs or anything. Even when it got really hot, I just used that liner.
Because you spent probably more time in shelters than nearly everybody I've ever spoken to on the trail. Did you?
True.
Were there any other incidents in shelters that happened? Once again, I have no idea whether there were. I mean, were there snakes or anything like that?
So I tried to avoid all the shelters with snakes. There was a couple that had to skip because they had like copperheads and stuff in them because the copperheads were eating the mice. I'm like, I'm gonna go ahead and keep going, and I would just like I stayed at Kincora Hostel once with Bob Peoples because I had to like pass a shelter, and he's like, "Oh yeah, there's a snake in there." Luckily, I didn't have any like super bad shelter experiences. Like outside of like mice kind of jumping on me and like just meeting crazy random people. Some people that are at shelters for days at a time. I'd say homeless people, but we're all homeless on the trail.
Of course, so
like I mean, there's always some funny experiences, but I kind of liked it because you always met people and like had conversations. Like if you were just a stealth camp or tent away from people, you wouldn't really talk to those people.
Of course you do.
Kind of forced me to get out of my comfort zone and talk to people and make new friends. So it was fun.
And you clearly got quite a bit of confidence by doing the AT because when you came back, you ran a marathon, which is kind of crazy. So tell us how that came about and what it was like to run a marathon, you know, the difference between a long distance hike and a long distance race. What's that like?
So I think what a lot of thru-hikers probably experience, if I had to guess, is like by the end of the trail, you've hiked 2,200 miles and you've done something that very few people can say they've ever done.
Sure.
And it kind of gives you this feeling of like, okay, if I can do this, I can do anything. And that's a great takeaway from the AT. So as I was finishing up, I was like 2,000 miles in. I'm like, you know, I can conceptualize 26 miles. Like I'll just sign up for a marathon. And I was like, screw it. I'm like, I'll just do it because I've never ran an organized race in my life over 400 meters. That was my longest event in track, and I've never ran even like a 5K or 10K or anything like that. So I was like, well, I've hiked 30 plus miles. Like I can run a marathon. I was like, with no pack, soft, cushy shoes, and flat ground. Yeah, it should be a piece of cake, right? I went on my first run when I got home and went a mile and a half. I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be tough. It still sucks just as bad.
So did you actually prepare for the marathon then and do proper training? Because I know we're going to talk about your training for the AT in a minute, but was the training really necessary? So you realised pretty much straight away that the dynamic, or sorry, the I don't know, the strengths you have from your hiking don't necessarily translate to the to the marathon. Although I suspect the mental side of it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing I was prepared for from the trail was my cardiovascular condition was really good. Just because you're hiking so many miles every day for so long, your cardiovascular endurance is pretty solid. So I was good there. And then you just get really good at accepting pain on the trail because there's so many times where you just have to get up and hike, even if you feel like crap, your body hurts and you're tired and you just don't want to do it. So like everyone I think on that completes the AT gets very mentally tough.
Yeah.
So that I had going for me. What didn't help is that my ankles hurt, my knees hurt, my hips hurt. Stuff that I didn't even realize hurt until I just stopped moving for a couple of days, because I only took like 2 or 3 zeros. So
Yeah.
by the time I got off trail and actually like was stationary and not hiking 20 miles a day for a couple of days, my body was like, everything kind of came out.
Isn't it
But
remarkable? Don't you think so? How the and we've talked about this a few times with guests recently. How you get a pain somewhere, say a hip, and then the next day it doesn't seem to hurt as much because your knee's hurting more. It's almost as if you could only process one pain at a time, didn't it? And
exactly,
they kind of
exactly.
move all the way around your body. So how did you get on in the marathon? Did it work out how you'd expected it to?
Yeah, so when I got back, I started trying to run. I was really struggling to motivate myself. And I reached out to a friend that visited me twice on the trail. He went through Grayson Highlands with me, and he also went through most of the Whites, the Presidential Range, Franconia Ridge, all that.
Sure.
So he's a pretty tough guy, and
Well,
I
he
put him
must be,
through.
yeah.
To come off the couch and do that. I put him through some tough stuff. His name's Kobe. And I figured, man, if I could convince someone to do this with me, training would be way easier. So naturally, I reached out to Kobe, and he said, the only way I'm going to do this is if you buy me a new pair of Hokas, like a new pair of running shoes, like jokingly, like, if you buy me these shoes, yeah, I'll run it with you. I was like, okay, bet. And we went to the store and bought them on the point.
That's
And
cool.
then he signed up. He didn't have a choice, so he spoke too soon. So he started training with me, and we ended up getting our mileage up. We would do most of the time 5 to 6 miles, and then we did a couple that were 10 plus in like 2 weeks before the race, and like they were tough, but we knew we could do it, and we really worked on our mental strength a lot. We did a lot of ice baths, following something called the Wim Hof method. So we were in taking full body ice immersion to the neck and working on our breathing and just kind of strengthen ourselves mentally, because in a month, you can't really train your body to make the adaptations enough to be ready for a marathon. But you can strengthen your mind. And that's, I think, was more important than anything, because a lot of it's just pushing through pain,
Yeah, sure.
as many things are. So.
And how did he cope with the marathon? Was he okay? Did you run together?
So this is the crazy thing. We ran together. We stayed together the whole time. He actually did better than me, and I had hiked 2,200 miles. We switched positions because I was the one pushing him up the mountainside when he came to visit. And then when we got to the marathon, we got to the last 7 or 8 miles, and I was just dying. Like, everything was cramping up. Like, I was just toasted. And he's like, "Come on, man, let's go. I'm like, I can't. Like, we were having to do like walk run intervals, but he pushed me through. So I needed him more than anything that day. So he got his payback.
That was cool. So the hike itself, you were, you really made me laugh when you told me about how you selected some of your gear. So tell us what one of the most important things for you with the gear was.
So as you guys probably know from the description, my trail name is Shaker. And I got that pretty soon on the trail because I used a shaker bottle, like a blender bottle that you'd use like at the gym to make protein shakes for all of my meals. So I would wake up and I would make a shake with Carnation instant breakfast and peanut butter and olive oil and oats. It'd be like 1,200 calories.
Revolting.
Oh yeah, it's delicious. And I'd chug that in the morning. People would wake up to hear me shaking. Then at night I'd make the same thing and they'd go to sleep with me shaking. And then I'd make electrolytes in it during the day. And I didn't have a stove because I wanted to cut weight. So I cold soaked all my meals in the shaker bottle too. So I would do Knorr's rice sides. I'd cold soak those for 2 hours or so as I'm walking to camp and add tuna and mayo and eat that with a long spoon. And my shaker bottle was my only piece of like cooking. And it was like my all-in-one.
Were you good with that? Not many people do cold soak. I mean, I know some do, but a hell of a lot of people really want the comfort of warm food and so on. But you went in May, so you probably didn't get terribly bad weather anyway, especially you finished September. So that worked out for you, did it, just cold soaking?
Yeah, that was another benefit of starting a little bit later. I really missed almost all the cold weather, so I really didn't mind starting out with cold food, and I'm not really a picky person, so I knew it was one of those compromises I could make. Anytime you cut weight or cut a piece of gear, there's always a compromise, and
Sure.
You just got to pick what's right for you. I mean, for some people, they never think of doing that, and I wouldn't blame them. But for me, it felt normal, it felt easier, and it was less time I had to spend at camp and spend cooking, and it allowed me to spend more time doing what I ended up loving to do, which is just being in nature and hiking. So
yeah, cool.
It's a win-win.
So no, what I was actually referring to was that you do like your gear to match don't you? You're pretty keen on a particular brand. So tell us how you actually selected your gear. I've never heard this either.
Yeah. I have issues. I like all my stuff to match. Probably a little bit of OCD or perfectionism or whatever you want to call it. So all my gear was Sea to Summit except for my backpack because they do not make backpacks yet. For my backpack, I had an REI Flash 55, and it's the best $200 backpack you could ever buy. It still looks brand new, which is crazy to me. So I love that. It was just over a 2-pound backpack, like similar level with like a Hyperlight or a Gossamer gear. And for me, it was perfect. So it's super comfortable. I tried to go to a smaller pack even when I got super light, like halfway through, and it just wasn't as comfortable. So I stayed with that. And then Sea to Summit was all my other gear. I started with a little bit heavier Sea to Summit stuff, and then by the time I got to Damascus, I switched out for an ultralight 50-degree quilt and an ultralight uninsulated sleeping bag because it was so dang hot this year. There was like, I don't know.
Yes, I've heard this. It's tremendously hot, wasn't it? Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It was like the middle 2 months, it was like a national heat advisory for like weeks on end. Like heat advisory, like a heat index getting up to like 100 degrees plus for several days at a time. And the humidity was just exhausting. It was just taking it out of people.
And did you find that your gear worked out well for you, or were you actually handicapped by having Sea to Summit?
No, it was all perfect. Big shout out to Sea to Summit. I wish they'd sponsor me, but they didn't. They lost an opportunity. But no, it was good. I don't have, I think, any gear that I'd really switch out. It all worked pretty perfectly for me. But I had a pretty minimal setup, and nothing broke and nothing busted, so I can't complain.
So you set out like a train, as you say, pretty fast, and you started moving with all your Sea to Summit gear. And I was really impressed at how, I don't know what the word was, I guess you were very intentional about what you wanted to think about. You wanted to think about what was going to happen to your life, and you're reflecting, I guess, on what was going to make you happy. This, I think, was the theme we talked about before. Mm-hmm. So when you were done, and we're going to come back to the hike again in a minute, but did that thinking that you did you learn what you needed to make yourself happy?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I think everyone that starts a thru hike is seeking some sort of, I don't know if clarity is the right word, or like some sort of meaning or purpose in their hike, and they just kind of want to figure out more about themselves. And I felt the same way. So I went into it just kind of optimistic, like, all right, like it's gonna, when things get tough, I'm gonna be mentally and physically exhausted, and I just got to choose to keep going. And I'm gonna be by myself the majority of the time, alone with my thoughts. And you don't have any choice but to quote unquote fight your demons and really reflect. And,
did you have them?
I mean, yeah, I think everybody does. I think everyone has stuff that they go through that they don't tell other people about. Yeah. And we're usually, I say we, normal society, a normal person is so busy in everyday life with their responsibilities, with their job, or kids, or relationships, husbands, wives, whatever it may be, that they don't really take time with themselves to kind of figure out what's wrong. You got so many distractions that you can't really ever get to the root of what you're feeling. So it gave you that. And sometimes it was tough. Like it was just as mentally tough as it was physical a lot of times. But I think it allowed me to kind of work through a lot of those things. And by the time I was done with the hike, I just had this like overwhelming feeling of like, everything's okay. Like nothing is wrong. Like it took me 24 years and 2,200 miles to realize like everything I've ever needed was pretty much right in front of me, just for me to take.
How interesting is that? And has that feeling stayed with you since you've come back to so-called real life?
For the most part, yes. I will say the first couple of weeks coming back from the trail was difficult, to say the least. A lot of people on trail had warned me that there's this thing called post-trail depression.
Absolutely.
Which I was like, okay, like, yeah, I could see that. Like, you know, when you come back from like vacation or come back from like a mission trip or something, and you have that time where you're like kind of down in the dumps, you're like, yeah, if I'm gone for 4 or 5 months and doing something I love, I come back, it's going to be hard. But it really hit me really tough. And it took me probably 3 or 4 weeks to fully kind of get out of the funk that I was in. And I think the biggest reason for that was I left the trail. I was in nature every single day, doing extreme physical activity. And I came back and I was like, now I'm not moving as much. And now I'm back in Columbus, back in the city. and I'm around people who generally aren't happy with either what they're doing in life or where they're heading. And I'm going on runs and waving to people and saying hi, and people are ignoring me. Whereas like on the trail,
Oh,
every
yeah.
time you pass someone, they're like, "Oh, hey, what's your name? How are you doing today? Where are you
Yeah.
heading? Like, do you want to meet up later?" Like, it's so much positivity, and to just kind of lose all that, it was like a whirlwind. It was like a train hit me. It was very tough.
But Sam, you still got to remember, and I can say this from the experience of being 70. Your world, your life, it's all still in front of you. Of course it is, and you realize it when you get off the trail. That hasn't changed. It's all there waiting for you to walk forward and get it and pick it up, and it really. So I think you should keep that positivity. It's something that we noticed it so much recently. A bunch of us attended an event, and there were thru-hikers came through. And the thing that we all saw straight away was the complete and utter joy they were experiencing by being on a thru-hike. So I know how I know how that feels. But just keep positive with it. And going quite fast. And you mentioned about you pass people a lot. You spent a lot of time by yourself. You did all this intentional thinking. Did you miss company, or did you think I'm quite happy not to be with people right now?
So I would say I had the perfect balance. I'm very lucky in that I had a grand total of 18 people visit me on the trail.
That is remarkable, by the
way. Yeah, it's a high number. I haven't heard anyone with more yet.
No,
so I feel very lucky to have that many caring and supportive people in my life, most of which were close friends from PT school who were in very good shape and able to do 4 to 5 days at a time with me.
That helps.
And then that helps. And then others were family members that came for a couple of days and would just do a 10 or 15 mile hike with me and then leave. So I think it was nice. I never was really alone for more than like 2 to 3 weeks at most.
Right.
So I had a good balance of like someone to meet up to look forward to, and then time by myself where I could reflect on everyone that I visited, all the hiking and all the experiences I've had, where I had like these extreme feelings of gratitude after people would leave, and I could just soak that in. And then when times got tough, I could be like, all right, like I'm only got 3 more days until I see my sister Anna, or I see my friend Allie, or whoever it may be.
We're gonna talk about your mother and you on Katahdin later, but and you mentioned earlier that you got your degree in as a physical therapist, and that you were able to treat yourself on trail. That's interesting because not many of us know what to do when things go wrong with our bodies. So tell me, what tips did you not so much what did you learn, but what did you apply that made you feel physically better?
So yeah, I was never an endurance athlete before. Like I had some patients that were ultra marathoners and pretty crazy athletes. I'm like, I'd never do something like that. Like you guys are crazy. But I really got a good understanding of very many overuse injuries. So I named a couple of them already. IT band syndrome is a common one. So that's when you have pain on the outside of your knees, kind of where that muscle inserts.
Right.
I'm sure you felt that.
Of course.
Pain on the outside of your knees.
I feel pain everywhere.
Great. Awesome. You're probably going to relate to all these then. Another one's patellar tendonitis or patellofemoral pain syndrome, which is pain in the front of your knee, right below your kneecap, kind of where that tendon attached from your kneecap.
I got that one.
Tibia.
I had that one, yeah.
Yeah, pain in the front of your knees, especially like when you're going downhill.
Oh, yeah.
That's when it really starts to flare up. Another common overuse, a lot of these are itises, which is essentially inflammation of tendons.
Sure.
So another one is Achilles tendonitis, which is your Achilles tendon right behind your heel.
Never had a problem with that. I'm glad I haven't.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
And of course, last but not least, and probably the most common on trail is plantar fasciitis, which again is inflammation of the plantar fascia. So all very common overuse injuries. And with all of them, I had a wide array of stretches that I could use to help this stuff out. And then, like I said, I also use my trekking pole and a glide stick to kind of work out my IT bands, Achilles tendonitis a little bit. But I had for a lot of these, what your tendons typically want when they're inflamed and angry and mad, it's from that repetitive motion of hiking.
Sure.
They want a little bit of what's called time under tension. So if you say you're standing on a step and you lower down and then go about halfway up and you just hold there, it kind of helps your tendon, your collagen fibers kind of realign in your tendon, and it's going to feel a little bit better.
Wow.
So you couple some isometrics or some eccentrics, which is slowly lowering, for say Achilles tendonitis or say patellar tendonitis. There's so many.
To me, that's counterintuitive. You actually exercise the thing that's hurting you.
Yeah, that's a really common misconception.
Yeah.
We say exercise is medicine.
I'm absolutely full of common misconceptions, so don't worry about that.
Great.
So yeah, but you also told me the other day that you did a couple of specific things. It was the cold foot soaks every night, apparently, and your elevated feet both lunchtime and at night. So that was something that was important for what reason?
Yeah. So before I left, I talked to John Quigeni, the guy from Bluffton who had also done the thru-hike in 2019.
Yeah.
I believe it was 2019. Might have to fact check that. But he kind of said, yeah, like take care of your feet. Like that's going to be the number one thing that takes people out. And my research online supported that. Take care of your feet, like foot and ankle stuff. Those kind of injuries are like what takes people out. So I take my socks off. Usually both for the first few weeks, I'd do it at lunch and then when I got to camp. And the cold springs in Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee were ice cold,
Sure.
crystal clear, and it felt so good. So that all that cold essentially is like putting an ice pack around your feet, and it removes some of that swelling and helps that return blood flow. So it just feels really good for one, and it reduces swelling, which you're of course going to have when you're going and doing that much activity.
I did about 3 times in my 6 months, but yeah, I wish I'd done it more.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And then elevating your feet is a similar token. So you have a lot of lactic acid buildup in your legs from all the hiking, and then of course a lot of swelling too, and that's natural because you're using your leg muscles all day.
Sure.
You're going to have some blood pooling around your ankles and your calves. So elevating your feet allows that blood to return to your heart and kind of recirculate and kind of get some of that swelling out as well. So all that sort of stuff kind of expedites recovery.
Would you sleep then with your feet elevated?
Oh, no way.
No,
I would just do it for about 10 to 15 minutes at lunch and then 10 to 15 minutes when I got to camp. And that's really all it takes.
That is enough, is it? Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. I've been told by people before to elevate my feet at night, but no, I just could never make that work for me at all.
Yeah, you certainly could. It would just be very hard to sleep. And I'm sure there's certain conditions that it might be better for. And if you're really dedicated, possibly, but I was not.
And knowing so much about this stuff, did you help other people on the trail with this physical therapy stuff? Did you give them tips, or do they just do their own thing?
Yeah, I mean, I tried honestly not to tell very many people that I was a physical therapist, because as soon as you say something like, people's like, oh, I got this that hurts and this that hurts, I was like, can you fix me? Especially on the trail. Like I talked to a couple podiatrists on trail where like, yeah, I did like a whole eval on the whole shelter and like fixed everyone's feet. Like that's so funny. But no, I had a couple people that like generally came up with that had some sort of injury, or they were like really struggling. One of them was a friend of mine that I met on trail named Mike. He's a rep for Gossamer Gear, and he was also a photographer and documenting the whole trail. Nice. Super cool guy. And he had like, we call it peroneal tendonitis, the muscles on the outside of your calf that wrap around your ankle. And I kind of helped him. I used the trekking pole and did some treatment. So as a friend, I don't think I could technically I was licensed to practice in that state, just Ohio, but I just helped him out a little bit, did a little bit of work with him, and gave him a couple stretches, nothing crazy. And then I think he got significantly better, and he was doing a yo-yo. So he's a really crazy guy.
Gosh,
and he was trying to push like 30, 35 miles a day. So he was like slowing down to my 20 miles a day. So I was trying to help get him back. And I think he ended up getting better. And I think he's probably on his way back, if I had to guess. I'll have to check in on him. Okay. And then there's another guy who had a pretty bad fall. It was around the whites. And it was just as simple as doing a couple tests. Make sure he doesn't have any ligamentous damage. Make sure he doesn't have any fractures or anything obvious to me. And sometimes all people need to hear is like, no, like you're okay. Like you keep going. Like, yeah. They're like, cause he was going to get off trail, go to an urgent care. I'm like, man, I really don't see anything that really surprises me here.
You don't walk up to people and say, stand back, I'm a doctor, do you?
No. Cause you can get in trouble for that. I can give you an opinion as a friend, non-medical advice.
That's right. Yeah.
I was like, if I would just say like, if I were you, I wouldn't be too worried, but.
And I know that before you headed out, you deleted social media. Why did you do that?
Yeah, so I don't know. A lot of people my age, I don't know if you've watched the documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, but it's just everything. There's just so much, like you're getting just like forced to look at things on your phone. I say forced, but like, yeah, it's like there's so many algorithms that are like going to show you exactly what you want to click on and just keep you absolutely glued to your phone.
Sure.
And I thought this was a perfect opportunity when I already don't have great service just to kind of disconnect from all that. Not that I think it's inherently bad. I think it can have very positive effects in certain scenarios. But for me, to let my mind relax and to not be even thinking about getting on social media or getting on my phone, it allowed me to more fully experience the present moment I was in on the trail. And I'm very, very glad that I did that.
That's such a, do you know what? That is such a mature reflection. And that really struck me when you told me that. I thought, hey, what a smart guy to do that, because you can spend so much time there. And you probably notice if you were with people at all in shelters, although you say you often weren't, people would, first thing they would do would be to check whether they've got any service at the shelter so they could look at their social media. It was amazing to me. I saw that and I noticed it's so much different from 2019, because I went in 2014 as well, to go again in 2019, because there was more service at shelters, people were looking more and more. But now you have started up again on Facebook, and I saw a short video of you finishing on Katahdin with your mother. That must have been really special, and you could actually tell from the sobs that were going on from the person filming it and also your mother that it was special for them as well. Tell us about that.
So my mom's my superhero for sure. I didn't have social media, but I would give her updates, and she would post pictures and updates for people on Facebook. So big shout out to her for doing that, to allow people to still follow along, because so many people, like, they want to vlog and they want to keep their family updated. So she allowed me to disconnect while still keeping all my friends and family updated. So first things first, big shout out to her for doing that for me. And then as far as what it meant to summit Katahdin with her, I think it's important to backtrack a little bit and recognize that I think everyone that finishes successfully has some sort of deep-seated motivation or visualization as to why or who or what they're doing it for.
Sure.
And for me, when times got tough or I needed to like walk the extra mile or do the extra day, I would always visualize summiting Katahdin with my mom. And no matter what, like, that would get me through whatever I was going through, because I knew it would be something that was incredibly challenging for both of us. I knew we'd become closer after that. I knew by the time I got there and we summited together, I'd be more proud that she hiked Katahdin than the fact that I hiked the whole trail. And that's fine with me. That was fine with me. But it was one of those things that was my constant motivation. It was the thing I visualized every day. And I would listen to this song by Mike Posner called Home. And it made me.
Great song.
It is a great. Have you listened?
I have heard of it, yeah.
Good, yes, it's beautiful, and every time I listen, it make me tear up. I think of my mom, and it had a really special meaning to me. So
cool, it was so cool. And she said, what did she say when she actually touched us on? You said, "Don't ever ask me to do anything like that again." Or
yeah,
something like that.
Don't ever make me do something like this again. But she had no hiking experience. She was training since the time I left, doing 5 miles a day, then up to 10 miles a day. Then I got to the halfway point and talked to some former thru-hikers, and they're like, hey, like, just so you know, Katahdin's like rock climbing. Like, it's like straight up for 5 miles. I'm like, oh boy. I was like, hey, Mom, like, I know there's no elevation gain or loss in Bluffton, Ohio, where it's just farmland. But you're going to have to go to the stadium and use the stairs and go 500 feet for the first week, 1,000 the next, 2,000. So she was upping her elevation on the stairs in the 2 months leading up to Katahdin. But she broke down probably 7 or 8 times on the way up the mountain because it's that physically taxing.
Oh yeah.
And it can be very disorienting because you're so high up and you look out and it's just look straight down all around you. It's like if you never experienced something like that, just to go and do that like she did,
it's remarkable. That is remarkable.
It's truly remarkable, and I'll hype her up till the day that I die. And I hope she's very proud of herself, because what she did, I couldn't imagine anyone else
that first
doing.
bit, getting above once you get out of tree line and you just look straight up, don't you?
Yeah, you see boulders the size of cars, and you're like, "What have I gotten myself into?"
Yeah, but the big adventure, as it always is, was finally over. Do you miss it?
Oh, every day.
You still do. And you know what? You will forever.
Yeah, I believe that. You did it twice, right? That's how much you missed it.
Yeah, I said I'd never go again, but I did it twice. Yeah, right. Yeah. Will you go again?
I don't think I would necessarily do the AT again.
Right.
Like we mentioned and talked about earlier, like I like to experience new things and do things that are kind of out of my comfort zone. I think I'd struggle to do the same thing twice.
Wow.
As much as I love being in nature, though, I could potentially see myself doing another through hike. It's going to get more difficult to do a 5 to 6 month
Of course, yeah.
expenditure, just like life, relationships, responsibilities, work. As you know, all that stuff kind of pops up. But I wouldn't rule it out. I think if I were to do something on that scale again, I would do something different, like maybe like a bike across the U.S. sort of thing, or something that's a little bit different, just to kind of mix it up. So we'll see. There's always more on the horizon.
I tell you what, I'm always so delighted. There are so many different types of people on the trail. You're a remarkable young man. I'm not patronising you, I'm just saying you're a remarkable young man. I can tell just from talking to you and how you addressed the whole hike. Your mother must be so damn proud of you. As much as you're proud of her, I'm sure she's so damn proud of you as well. But look, I do appreciate you coming on the show and telling this story, because you're quite a guy, and I thank you for coming on. Yeah,
thank you very much. I appreciate it, Mighty Blue. You're the man too. No one's got a better British accent than you.
Okay, man. Take it easy, all right? Cheers.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Cheers.
As I mentioned earlier, I took a lot of notes about Sam and his impressions from the trail. I think the most important point he made was that, having reflected where he was in his life at this point, it was all okay. Everything was in front of him, and he just needed to go forward and pick it up. It's quite a lesson to learn for anybody, but particularly for younger people. And I thought his list of potential injuries and their treatment may well prove helpful to hikers out there when they encounter them. What about summiting with his mum? First, hats off to Mum for doing this. Awesome effort. But it was particularly lovely that he used that image in his head of summiting Katahdin with his mum to keep him going when things got tough. And by the way, I said that I knew the song Home by Mike Posner, but I didn't. I was thinking about an entirely different song called Home. However, I checked it out and it is awesome. It's accompanied by a video of Mike Posner climbing and getting to the top of Mount Everest. You should check it out. If you've got Amazon Music, you can search for Home by Mike Posner and see the official video, which is also awesome. And actually, while you're checking out that song, also check out and subscribe to the YouTube channel of one of our previous guests on the show, Stephanie Lorenz, or Sunshine. She wrote to me asking if I'd subscribe and pass it on to you. She did the PCT this year, so there's plenty to watch. I'm going to add that link to the show notes as well. Now let's meet the newest member of our Mighty Blue class of 2023. This is Mark Carpenter. Today's guest in the Mighty Blue class of 2023 is Mark Carpenter. Hey Mark, how are you?
I'm doing great, Steve.
Are you looking forward to getting on the trail in 23?
Absolutely. It's been a long time dream of mine, and looking forward to getting it going.
So why? What is the, and I know it is different for everybody, although people who've had this dream for a long time sometimes find it difficult to articulate exactly what it is. What is it about the trail? What is your why? Why do you want to do it?
Yeah. I don't know if I've nailed that down yet either, but as a kid, I was always enamored with geography. I just wanted to travel. I wanted to go places. And as a kid, we didn't go very many places. My parents, our vacations were typically visiting family in Michigan and Kentucky and Indiana. One family vacation in Florida, but what really got the bug going was when I was an early teenager, got to go with my sisters and their youth group to the Smoky Mountains.
Sure.
And
that normally puts people off, by the way.
Is that right? Well, it was my first opportunity to get out into the woods and do some real hiking. And I do remember specifically that we went to Clingman's Dome, and that
all right.
I was just fascinated. And the idea of being able to walk from Georgia to Maine, that was something I had to do.
I think that's one of the things that got me, that whole concept of one steady footpath for 2,000 miles. I've got to tell you, by the way, the good thing about having been to Clingman's Dome is that it is probably the ugliest part of the trail, that particular spot. And when you go out there, think of this: when you go out there, there'll be all these people who be walked up from the car park or the parking lot, and they're walking up their little ramp to get to the top there, and they're going to be looking at you thinking, "Why does that guy smell so awful?" and you'll think to yourself, "Why do they not get it?" it's quite something. So when are you actually planning to start the hike?
Well, my initial plan was to do like a flip-flop. Start around August 27th, or I'm sorry, April 27th.
Sure.
But I'm really like a traditionalist, so I want to go from Georgia to Maine.
Yeah.
And I picked out like March 2nd, and that was really, it's kind of a memorial date for my parents' anniversary.
That's lovely.
They were married for 72 years before their passing, and
good
Lord. So that sounded like a great date to start.
Yeah. I think that's a terrific memorial for them to get started. The good thing is, well, hopefully you don't finish on March the 3rd. So you want to make sure that March the 2nd is not only a start date, but it's the start of something fantastic. And what is your hiking experience so far? I mean, you said you first saw Klingman's Dome, but you didn't hike in there, did you? Or did you actually hike into it?
No, it was much like what you said, from the parking lot.
Right, sure.
And I've done some hiking over the years. I can't say I've done any extensive hiking. Was training, doing maybe 13 miles in a single day, but not back-to-back days. I planned on doing that here prior to in my shakedowns and further training. But no, I've done some day hiking, a couple times short backpacking trips, but nothing extensive like the Appalachian Trail.
What's the longest amount of time you've been in the woods then?
We've done camping. I've done tent camping, so probably a week or so tent camping.
All right.
But backpacking, just like a long weekend.
All right. It's funny, actually. It does become your job. By the way, what was your job? I think were you a firefighter?
Yeah, I was. I was a firefighter at an airport, and then became the chief, and then went to another suburban community as the chief, and retired as the city manager. So.
All right, cool. Yeah. So this is your time. What are you? You said you've done a 13-mile hike to prepare. What else have you done to prepare physically?
Well, to stay in shape, I try to do a marathon every year. So that keeps me going and training.
Sure.
So I've done a lot of running. I also plan on getting more involved in the gym, as far as, working on the core and the strength training.
I always plan on that as well.
That's how it's going for me right now.
Planning's great, yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what, though? The moment, and I was actually thinking about this morning, I'm putting together this store, this hiking store, basically T-shirts and stuff like that for merch. And I thought to myself that the step of something like the journey of 5 million steps starts with one step, which is a picture of the arch at Emicalola Falls. That moment when you go underneath that arch is going to be quite meaningful for you. Not only is it your parents' anniversary, but it's the start of your long journey. So you probably realise, having researched this, I suspect, that this is, well, it's tough physically. It is tough physically. There's no question about it. But mentally is where it really, really gets you. How are you preparing for that? And do you think you can prepare mentally?
I feel like I always think that I'm prepared, but during the marathons, that's a really mental game as well. Physically you train, but just to keep going and fight through the pain, mentally, that is difficult to do. But I think the biggest issue I'm going to have on the mental part is being away from my wife and family.
Sure.
We haven't been apart probably more than 10 consecutive days, 36 years, so that's going to be difficult.
I can see that in your face, funny. The listeners can't see it. I almost thought of taking a snap then, so because you're exposing a vulnerability there. But is your wife supportive of you doing this?
Yeah, she knows it's something that I need to get out of my system, if you will.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of traveling since I retired in July of 21. So we've done a lot of traveling together, and we got plans to do future travel. So
Sure. Now you're a retired guy, so I'm not presuming necessarily that money is no object. But are you going to make this the sort of hike that is quite comfortable? Are you going to go into town regularly and stay in hotels or hostel? What are you going to do? How's that? How are you going to work it out? Because some people do this trip on $500 a month. God knows how they do, but they do it on $500 a month. And as we've often said on the show, when you go into town, you start hemorrhaging money. How are you working out? How are you thinking about this whole thing about going into town and how you're going to live when you're out there?
Yeah, the things that I feel going to town is really to resupply.
Sure.
And maybe if it's if there's certain weather conditions that seem severe, definitely plan on getting off the trail. But no, I plan on staying on the trail most of the time.
Wow, good for you. Good for you. What about your equipment? Have you gone lightweight, or have you taken advice from people, or have you just done the usual rabbit hole, which most of us do?
Well, I'm kind of a mishmash right now. I had a friend who he had retired. Oh, he's probably retired 15 years now. But
Sure.
when he retired, he became an avid hiker. So I got a lot of his hand-me-down gear because he's retired from hiking.
All right,
so.
okay.
But it's
how
good
long
gear.
ago? Hang on. How long ago did you retire from hiking?
Oh, probably about 12 years ago.
Well, in that case, it's well out of date already. So, do you know what your weight's going to be so far?
On my practice hikes, probably around 25 pounds. Yeah.
With food and water?
Yes.
That's pretty good. That's
I'm
fine.
traveling light.
And are you gonna cold soak, or are you gonna actually cook and have hot food?
I'm looking to cook. I got to have
so-
that morning coffee.
Yeah, totally on board with you there. And one thing you should discover is biscuits and gravy. I don't get paid for this, by the way, but Mountain House biscuits and gravy is one of my favourite meals anywhere, and on the trail is the most wonderful thing with your coffee. So. Is your wife going to send you packages, or are you actually just going to resupply from town? And I can tell you, having done both, I found resupplying from town far more effective and allowed you to manage your weight far better.
Yeah, that is my plan, to resupply in town. But I also plan on there's certain family events that are going to happen in 23, right. So I do plan on leaving the trail for a few days at a time, but.
Oh, it's going to be tough. Well, for a start, you have to shower for about 5 times to get all the funk off you. But and then getting back on trail is I found that tough myself. So you'll get a mindset where your life is on trail, and suddenly you go home, and that's quite an interesting dynamic that develops there. And you will not be able to wait to get back to the trail. I can almost guarantee it. But I know it'd be lovely to see your family, your wife, and all that sort of thing. But you will commit yourself to this trail, and once you do, you really want to be there. What are you most looking forward to? You've seen all the great height, the beauty spots and places like that, and the Macadamia Knobs and the Katahdin sign and all that sort of thing. What are you most looking forward to out there?
I'm just looking for like the peace and the serenity. Being in public service.
Sure.
There's a lot of demands on your time, and
I'm sure
people pulling you in different directions. So. I'm looking forward to that part of the trail.
And what are you least looking forward to?
Probably the cold. As I get older, I less like cold.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it. How old are you, by the way, Mark? How old are you, by the way?
I'm 59, so I'm going to have my 60th during the hike.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
How are you going to celebrate that? Will you be home for that?
I do plan on coming home for that.
Oh, cool.
So I'm a big Cincinnati Reds fan. And I've been going to the Reds game on my birthday for about the last 10 years.
So you're coming home for a game?
And a visit, yeah.
That's excellent. And have you thought of trail names, or are you going to allow yourself to be named on the trail?
I think I'll allow myself to be named. I had a name as a kid growing up, but because I played a lot of baseball. And
Sure.
My hero was Pete Rose, with the head first slide. And... in the summer.
By the way, you expecting me, a Brit, to have any idea what or who you're talking about? I have heard of Pete Rose, by the way. I didn't know you were Cincinnati Reds, though.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
you would do the head first slides, and you would, you come up with the sweat and the dirt. And my nickname was Mud Carp. So I kind of like.
Oh my god! Oh my gosh! I reckon the Cincinnati Kid would be pretty good. But see what people name you. I'll be interested to see you report that as it goes on. Well, look,
Sure.
As I wish all of my class of 2023, I wish them all the best. I know we're going to have about 14 of you going. Only 3 or 4 of you are going to make it, which is a sad thought. But what I also know is you're all going to have a fantastic adventure, whatever you do, whether you get 20 miles, 500 miles, 1,000 miles, or whatever. Just stay safe and make sure you check in with me every now and then, and we'll see how you're going. And I just wish you all the best. And thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you, Steve.
Cheers, mate.
Right.
I tell you, you should have seen his face when we talked about not seeing his wife. And that may be the biggest problem for him. We just had to work out how he deals with that separation when he's out there. He seems like a pretty together guy and certainly quite fit, so I think he's got a good shot. We'll catch up with him again, along with all the others, before he heads out to see the progress he's making with his preparations. Thanks, of course, to our wonderful donors. This week, we had the following people to thank. Monthly donors who've stuck with us again: Mike DiCello, Jens Leberheider, Brian Helton Jr., Lisa Rana, Woody Bass and Natisha Webb. While we had a generous donation from Mark Bino as well. Thanks to you all. It really helps. Now we hear about the day after Independence Day, with George Stefanos moving through the Chenes with another long hiking day. I'll see you next week. Tuesday, the 5th of July, 1983, mile 895.4. The sleeping situation was so uncomfortable last night that Mark got up at 3:30 this morning and started to make breakfast. I rose shortly after he did and followed suit. Mark hit the trail at 5 o'clock using his flashlight, and I headed out at 5:30 at first light. Having gotten such an early start, I decided to try for 24 miles today to Rock Spring Hut. High Top Hut was perched near the edge of a wooded plateau on the lower southwest slopes of High Top Mountain, a short distance off the Appalachian Trail on a grassy road. After rejoining the AT, I completed the climb up High Top. There are a couple of excellent views of the Shenandoah Valley from small cliffs on the AT near the summit. The first looked westward, where secluded farm valleys wrapped in foothills fronted the Shenandoah Valley with its tidy farms and villages. The long, flat, blue-green line of Massanutten Mountain divided the portions of the valley drained by the north and south forks of the Shenandoah for many miles of its length. The second cliff also had a vista extending southward along the Blue Ridge crest for miles. The trail descended from the summit, steeply at first and then more gradually. It turned onto one of those very old abandoned farm roads that still linger from the old days and passed through the remains of a venerable apple orchard, now reverting to forest, before completing its descent into Swift Run Gap. US Route 33, a divided 4-lane highway cutting across the Blue Ridge, ran through the gap. The Appalachian Trail crossed the highway on a pedestrian footway along the bridge, which carried Skyline Drive over the larger road. The trail re-entered the woods on the other side and climbed back out of the gap. It soon turned onto another old dirt road, which it followed for 2 miles over Saddleback Mountain, passing some more overgrown pastures. The first place I stopped today for longer than a minute was the South River Picnic Grounds. I already had 6.5 miles under my belt this morning when I arrived, so I felt entitled to kick back for a half hour. I pulled off my boots and socks in order to give my feet a break while I sipped Tang and munched peanut butter crackers. Picnic tables were scattered along the grassy floor of an airy grove of tall hardwoods centred around a small building containing indoor restrooms with flush toilets and sinks. 2 trash cans and a water fountain were conveniently located right next to my table. Does it get any better than this? Shenandoah National Park is renowned in thru-hiker lore as the home of the free meal. Stories abound of lucky backpackers receiving barbecued hamburgers, potato salad and other delicacies from generous tourists in the campgrounds and picnic areas of the park. It's not happening for me. I keep hitting the picnic grounds early in the morning, before the tourists arrive. My timing has been just as bad at the campgrounds. I can live with this little disappointment, however. Thanks to those grocery stores in each campground, I'm doing a respectable job of feeding myself. 5 miles past the picnic area, I came to Lewis Mountain Campground and another small camp store. I bought Cokes, ice cream sandwiches and some chips and sat down for an hour on the grass outside to relax and enjoy my lunch. I actually became quite chilled sitting there. After days uncounted of heat and humidity, the weather finally turned cool, cloudy and dry this morning. That was my last break of any consequence today. When I left Lewis Mountain Campground, I'd already come more than 52 miles from Rockfish Gap in 2.5 days, and an additional 12 miles and change were planned for the afternoon. I chugged along, making good time despite the condition of my feet, the soles of which had become bruised and tender from all the miles. The next mountain over Lewis was Bear Fence. The Appalachian Trail skirted its rough, rocky crest, but a loop trail ran over it. The craggy summit was becoming overgrown with small, gnarled trees, but several projecting rock outcrops nearby looked southward along the Blue Ridge and westward over a broad chunk of the Shenandoah Valley. The loop continued along the crest, winding round and over the massive protruding rock fins of a ridge which resembled the back of a stegosaurus. Several spikes rose completely above the treetops, including a northern summit with a 4-star 360-degree panorama, which supplanted Black Rock as the finest viewpoint I'd encountered in Shenandoah National Park. To the south rose the summit of nearby Bear Fence. In the west, the wild wooded foothills dissolved gradually into the flattish, bucolic Shenandoah Valley below. Westward, the blunt, forested mass of Bluff Mountain combined with Bear Fence to enclose a secluded, wooded hollow. Up ahead to the north, beyond Bush Mountain, the Blue Ridge bulked higher and wider. A broad, flat swathe of Virginia's Piedmont region rolled eastward towards the invisible horizon, where the land greyed and faded into the haze beneath the high overcast. I could have easily sat up there for an hour, but a line of darker, more threatening clouds streaming towards me across the Shenandoah Valley urged me quickly onward. The trail continued across the Stegosaurus back, dwindling in elevation and submerging back into the forest as it approached his tail. Clambering over his spiked ridges carrying a backpack was no picnic, but the loop trail was short and I was soon back on the AT, descending alongside the drive on a narrow stretch of ridgecrest. A thunder shower of respectable magnitude overtook me at the end of the descent in Booton's Gap. I crossed a fire road just below the drive, wading through a blustery downpour. It blew over quickly, leaving me wet and somewhat more chilled in its aftermath. From the gap I climbed over a mountain called Hazeltop, whose 3,816-foot summit is the high point of the Appalachian Trail in Shenandoah National Park. There were no views to speak of from the wooded summit, but I stopped for a moment or two. I would not be seeing that elevation again on the trail until the Green Mountains of Vermont. Late in the day, the AT began to skirt a huge complex called Big Meadows, which sprawled across acres of ridgecrest. A short climb and a side trail brought me to the summit of Black Rock, not to be confused with Black Rock, a summit I traversed further south in Shenandoah. An incredible view, massive in scope, opened up, taking in thousands of acres of central Virginia. The Blue Ridge, south to Hazeltop and beyond, and north to Hawksbill and Stony Man, the two loftiest peaks in Shenandoah National Park. Hundreds of square miles of the Shenandoah Valley to the west. For about 40 miles, the long line of Massanutten Mountain divides the Shenandoah into two separate valleys. The western portion, drained by the North Fork of the river, is home to the major cities of the Central Valley. The eastern, more rustic portion, through which runs the South Fork, is known as Page Valley. Black Rock was perfectly situated along the ridgecrest to provide a prospect encompassing the entire length of Page Valley. A cluster of buildings, part of the Big Meadows Lodge, lay below me near the edge of the crest. A fair-sized swathe of forest had been cleared beyond the lodge, providing tourists in the overpriced rooms with a great view of the valley. The National Park Service has a policy of not interfering with the course of nature in their lands. Thus, the steady progressive disappearance of the old cleared fields in Shenandoah as they revert back to forest. Funny, but this policy did not seem to apply here. A projecting rock outcrop right on the Appalachian Trail just past the side trail provided about 50% of the scope of the summit's view. It was still excellent. A picture-book valley embraced by a U-shaped arc of ridges emptied into that broad panorama of the Page Valley. The smaller valley was a thin strip of buildings along a rural lane surrounded by a few fields and wooded hills. The prospect of Shenandoah's farms and villages created an idyllic picture of an America that might have been drawn from the homesick longings of a lonely expatriate. The sun was beginning to re-emerge, and the valley shone unbelievably green and vibrant. I tried to imagine the sight as it would have appeared in the autumn of 1864, when a man standing atop Black Rock would gaze down at a black charred wasteland spewing thick greasy smoke. Union General Ulysses S. Grant had ordered General Philip Sheridan to put the torch to the Shenandoah Valley, the Confederacy's last great granary, so thoroughly that the crows flying over it for the balance of the season will have to carry their provender with them. In the words of Grant's friend and associate, General William T. Sherman, war is cruelty, and you cannot refine it. The Appalachian Trail followed the edge of cliffs most of the distance around Big Meadows. Through occasional openings in the foliage, I continued to enjoy some of the best views in the park. Amusingly, much of this portion of the trail was gravel-surfaced and brief stretches were actually paved. Protect our wilderness. Please stay on the sidewalk. Believe it or not, I passed up the side trail to the store and snack bar. At that point, I'd already come more than 20 miles today, and the ball on my right foot was hurting so badly I could hardly put weight on it. I was still 3.5 miles from Rock Spring Hut. All I cared about was getting there, taking my boots off, and lying down. After leaving Big Meadows behind, the trail passed below the brooding grey mass of Franklin Cliffs on a narrow ledge between their base and the top of another set of cliffs. I enjoyed more fine views of another wooded hollow sloping down into the Shenandoah Valley, but I didn't linger. Had I stopped, I may not have been able to resume. I was spent, and it was growing late. At the end of a gradual climb just before the shelter, a massive boulder offered one last view of the Shenandoah Valley and a glimpse of a large spur ridge of hawksbill known as Naked Top. It had obviously received its name during a different era of its botanical history. The crest was now thoroughly wooded. Limping the last few miles to the shelter, I had been compelled to break frequently, but I still managed to arrive by 6:45. After hiking 24 miles, I was somewhat dismayed to find the clearing surrounding the shelter teeming with another large group of Boy Scouts. Tonight looked to be shaping up as a rerun of last night, and I needed a good night's sleep far too badly to relish that idea. I was relieved when the man leading this group walked over and assured me that they were hiking down the trail a ways to camp for the night. Mark, who was also staying at Rock Spring tonight, had told them about the group we had run into last night. The scout leader we met here asked me if I knew the troop number and the hometown of that other group. He wanted to send a letter to the scoutmaster of that area. He told us that scout groups are not supposed to camp in the shelters along the Appalachian Trail, lest the weather was looking dangerously inclement. I did not have the slightest idea, but Mark, who had been a Boy Scout, knew all this information, and he told him. After this group had departed, Mark confided to me that he hated squealers, namely the man who was going to send a letter to that other group's scoutmaster. I found that statement ironically amusing, as Mark had unhesitatingly sung like a canary to this gentleman, but I reserve comment. Personally, I hope those guys get screwed. The standard of trail ethics they were teaching these boys was abysmal. Rock Springs Hut sits on the floor of a shallow, gently sloping valley nestled just below Naked Top. An excellent spring bubbled out of a large, elaborate natural rock formation a bit further down the valley. Near that spring was a rustic locked cabin where the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club rents out homogenized wilderness experiences. The front porch had a nice peephole view of the valley. Mark and I have the shelter all to ourselves. As night fell, we swapped stories and grew to know each other. He told me a little bit about his life, at which point I laughed and told him that he was a... Being a fellow native of the New York City area, he laughed too. My favourite story concerned a time when he was living with a high school teacher. He could not understand why she became so upset when he kept the little she brought home to tutor. Somehow, I find myself really liking this guy, better than anyone else I met on the trail, except for Dave and Ron. I don't have the slightest idea why.